такі сумні сходини. Майже 85 років тому відбулася трагедія, яка забрала життя мільйонів наших братів і сестер в Україні. Забрала через найжорстокішу смерть, забрала від голоду. Мова йде про не кілька десятків чи тисяч людей. Мова йде про понад 7 чи 9 мільйонів, які стали жертвами Голодомору. Подібного не знає людська історія. Аналогів не знає світ. В основі його лежало не стихійне лихо, а яке від волі людей незалежне. В основі цієї трагедії лежала диявольська зла, ціл ворогів нашого народу та безбожної влади знищити наш волелюбний та працьовитий народ. Дорогі мої, принесімось хоч на мить, хоч бодай думкою в той жахливий час. Почуємо знову через роки той плач, те голосіння мільйонів матерів та батьків, у яких не вистачало сліз, щоб оплакувати своїх померлих дітей, смертю яких насолоджувався ворог. Почуємо ті передсмертні зойки, які, наче якась пекельна, сатанинська мелодія, наповнювали тоді нашу землю. Почуємо, пам'ятаємо, у нас немає права забути це. І все ж та мета, яку хотів осягнути лютий ворог, ним не досягнула. Ця трагедія хоч і нанесла страшну рану нашому народу, проте не знищила нас. Вона тоді, як і сьогодні, зміцнила нас. Більше того, вона навіть послужила початком кінця безбожної влади, бо, як говорить Святе Письмо, невинно пролита кров людська волає до Бога про помсту. My dearly beloved brothers and sisters in Christ, year after year we gather together as Ukrainians in mournful commemorations of the genocidal Holodomor, the famine of 1932-33. 85 years ago, a tragedy took place which took the lives of millions of our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, took the lives through the most horrifying of deaths, starvation. We're not speaking here about tens or hundreds or thousands of people, but about up to 10 million. Some historians are speaking these days of even more who were victims of this famine. Human history has never recorded a loss of such immensity. The cause of this tragedy was not some spontaneous disaster, but rather the satanic will of individuals, the evil goal of the enemies of our nation, and the desire of an atheistic regime to destroy our freedom-loving and hard-working nation. Let us go back in our minds for just a brief moment to this horrifying time. Let us feel again the cries of torment of millions of mothers and fathers in whom there were not enough tears to shed for their dead children, the death of whom was sweetness to the enemy. Let us feel the near death screams which rose up like a satanic melody throughout Ukraine. Let us feel have no right ever to forget it. In spite of all their efforts, the goal of the enemy, however, was never met. This tragedy, though it deeply wounded our nation, did not destroy us. At that time, and even today, it strengthens us. Even more so, we might say that it even served as the beginning of the end for the atheistic regime. For as we read in Holy Scripture, the shedding of innocent human blood invokes the vengeance of God. Let us remember all of those who perished unnecessarily. Let us think about the fact today that if those millions had not perished, the demographers say the population of Ukraine would be approaching 100 million today. The consequences of the Holodomor were far, far greater to our nation than just the deaths of millions of people. Let us pray.
любив началити і зітхання. І всяке порішення вчинене ними словом чи ділом чи думкою, як благий і чоловік любить Бог прости. Бо немає людини, що жили і не грішили. Ти бо єдиний без гріха, правда твоя правда до віки, і слово твоє істина.
For you are our dead resurrection life. God has made us all flesh and had no death, and made together brother us, and you gave life to your world. Now, Lord, listen
Excellencies, Reverend clergy, distinguished government officials, esteemed ambassador, honorable general counsel, dear Holodomor survivors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andriy Rabiy, and I'm the president of the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. It has become our tradition to gather here each year within the sacred walls of St. Patrick's Cathedral to pray for and honor the memory of the millions of innocent victims lost in one of the worst tragedies that befell the Ukrainian nation, the Holodomor genocide of 1932-33. What occurred 85 years ago in Ukraine was evil in its design and brutal in the methods. It was a deliberate act within the intent to destroy the Ukrainian nation. Through a carefully orchestrated mass collectivization effort, the Soviet regime imposed unreachable grain quotas upon the Ukrainian people, confiscated all foodstuffs, and even sealed Ukraine's borders, trapping Ukrainians within their own country with no food and no chance of escape. Not only were the borders of Ukraine blockaded, but tellingly so were the heavily Ukrainian populated regions of Russia itself. No people out, no food in. Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union, started to death millions of Ukrainians. This barbarous act resulted in the deaths of 7 to 10 million people. It was kept hidden from the world and is one of the largest genocides of the 20th century. And thus, in the very heart of Europe, in a country that boasts some of the world's most fertile soil and has often been referred to as the breadbasket of Europe, at the height of the famine in 1933, Ukrainians were dying at the rate of 25,000 per day. This was a deliberate, premeditated effort by the brutal communist regime of Joseph Stalin to subjugate an entire nation. Ladies and gentlemen, this was, in fact, an act of genocide in accordance with the Paris Genocide Convention of 1948. And who better to classify the Holodomor as a genocide than Raphael Lemkin, the Polish-American Jewish lawyer, educated in Ukraine, who coined the word genocide and spent his life working to develop the international law against such crimes. Lemkin applied the concept of genocide to the tragic events in Ukraine. He stated, and I quote, "What I want to speak about is perhaps the classic example of Soviet genocide, the longest and broadest experiment in Russification, the destruction of the Ukrainian nation. The attack is manifested as a systematic pattern, with the whole process repeated again and again to meet fresh outbursts of national spirit. The first blow is aimed at the intelligentsia, the national brain, so as to paralyze the rest of the body. Going along with this attack of the intelligentsia was an offensive against the churches, priests, and hierarchy, the soul of Ukraine. The third prong of the Soviet plan was aimed at the farmers, the largest mass of independent peasants, who are the repository of the tradition, folklore, and music, the national language and literature, the national spirit of Ukraine. The weapon used against this body is perhaps the most terrible of all, starvation. This not simply is a case of mass murder. It is a case of genocide, of destruction, not of individuals, but of a culture and a nation." End of quote. Others, like Oxford's Professor Norman Davies, have written, and I quote, "The purpose was to kill the Ukrainian nation. The world has seen many terrible famines, many aggravated by civil war, but a famine organized in a genocidal act of state policy must be considered unique." End of quote. Today, as we gather within these sacred walls of St. Patrick's Cathedral to mourn the millions of senseless deaths and to pray that such atrocities never occur again, we must also recommit ourselves to exposing the truth, the whole truth about the Holodomor. It is our solemn responsibility to pass the torch to the next generation, as they must continue to stand firm in honoring the millions who steadfastly suffered at the hands of a dictator and help to educate the world, especially now as we watch with horror the rise of modern dictators and tyrannical regimes around the world. The Holodomor cannot remain merely a Ukrainian issue. It must be a global one so that such tragedies do not reoccur. And thus, in the 85th year of this tragic event, Ukrainians around the world have advocated for their governments to recognize the genocide of the Ukrainian nation under the banner, Ukraine remembers, the world recognizes. Here in the United States, under the leadership of the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America and our many organizations and active local communities, working together with the Embassy of Ukraine, we have successfully advocated for passage of a United States Senate resolution recognizing that Joseph Stalin and those around him committed genocide against the Ukrainians. A companion resolution in the U.S. Congress has also been introduced and passed the House Foreign Relations Committee. Because of our efforts and our communities, 19 states have issued proclamations or passed resolutions recognizing the Holodomor as a genocide against the Ukrainian nation. The Ukrainian American community sincerely thanks both chambers of the U.S. Congress, the governors, and state legislatures for their continued support. It is our solemn responsibility to serve as the voice of the millions of innocents who were silenced and can no longer speak of the tortures. And it is our solemn responsibility to remember so that the world never forgets. The Holodomor genocide is but one example of Russia's ongoing campaign to enslave Ukraine, a nation that is entitled to its independence and freedom. Today, as we mark the 85th anniversary of the Ukraine's genocide, we also commemorate the 5th anniversary of Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity, a glaring reminder that Russian aggression in violation of international law against Ukraine continues into the present. Yet the Ukrainian people and their endurance during the horrors of the Holodomor 85 years ago, their bravery during the Maidan, and their steadfast fortitude during the present-day struggle in Crimea and eastern Ukraine are all testimonies of commitment of the Ukrainian people to live with dignity in a democratic and sovereign nation. As Russia continues to whitewash the inhumane crimes, including the most recent blatant acts of aggression against Ukraine, we must uphold the principles of honor and truth. Because truth and an informed public are the linchpins of a free society, ensuring that despotism does not triumph over democracy. To those survivors who are amongst us today, and the others who were fortunate enough to endure Ukraine's genocide, we thank the Lord for sparing your lives. And to the millions of innocent victims who perished as a result of Stalin's brutal genocidal policy, may you rest in peace. You will always be remembered and honored. Vichna im pamять. I now have the pleasure of introducing and inviting to the podium the Honorable Volodymyr Yelchenko, Ukraine's permanent representative to the United Nations. Ambassador Yelchenko has served as Ukraine's representative to the United Nations since 2015, including Ukraine's chairing the membership of the UN Security Council. Ambassador Yelchenko, welcome.
Thank you. Deep Reverend clergy, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests and friends, to the whole place for the model. It is an honor to address you today as we mark the 85th anniversary of the Holodomor of 1932-1933 in Ukraine and commemorate the memory of the victims of this tragedy. The events of the past century reveal clearly that the Soviet Union considered all manifestations of Ukraine's national character as an existential threat to its continuity, and was determined to keep Ukraine under Russian control at any cost. Following the communist takeover of much of the Ukrainian lands, Moscow began repressions against the Ukrainian nation that culminated in the Holodomor. This horrible and deadly famine was not a result of some natural disaster, as communist rulers claimed. It was the result of a deliberate policy of starvation implemented through forced collectivization and unrelenting food requisition. The driving motive behind the Holodomor was to crush any resistance to communist rule in Ukraine and to stamp out any aspirations of Ukrainians towards independence, deeply rooted in our people's cultural and historical heritage. The collapse of the Russian and Austrian-Hungarian empires in 1917-1918 led to the restoration of the Ukrainian statehood, even though short-lived. This was neither forgiven or forgotten by the Kremlin regime. Massive repressions and Russification, ruthless laws and policies implemented by the Soviet government targeted the Ukrainian nation with the only aim to terrorize the Ukrainian population into submission to the Stalinist totalitarian regime. The Holodomor did not plague Ukrainians. Despite the brutal ruining of millions of lives, there were millions of those who never lost human dignity and faith. Despite all the horror and atrocities of the genocide, Ukrainians demonstrated remarkable resilience and never gave up their goal of achieving independence and freedom to live their lives as they see fit, not as some foreign rulers would want them to. The Holodomor of 1932-33 was an undeclared war against the Ukrainian nation aimed at breaking its backbone, peasantry, as well as destroying its political and cultural elite. Today's Russian aggression against Ukraine is nothing but a continuation of the same policy of destruction of our country, which Moscow tried 85 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, with every passing year there are fewer and fewer remaining witnesses of this tragedy. It is a solemn responsibility of our generation and of our children to preserve the memory of the Holodomor and to honor its victims. Raising awareness of the horrors of the Great Famine of 1932-33 on the international level is also one of the ways of ensuring that such crimes of the past are not repeated in the future. Taking this opportunity, I would like to thank UN member states for their solidarity with Ukraine on this issue and reiterate the appeal to all countries to recognize the Holodomor as a genocide of the Ukrainian people. In this regard, we greatly appreciate the relevant resolution adopted by the United States Senate earlier this year. This important document condemns systematic violations of human rights of the Ukrainian people by the Soviet government and encourages dissemination of the information regarding the Holodomor to raise public awareness of this tragedy. I would like to sincerely thank the United States, and let me stress that Ukraine has no greater friend than the United States, including in our fight against the Russian aggression. Only 2 days ago, the United Nations voted in favor of the Ukrainian drafted resolution on the situation of human rights in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and in the city of Sevastopol, Ukraine, condemning the grave violations of human rights of Ukrainian citizens, residents of Crimea, as a result of an ongoing temporary occupation of this part of the territory of Ukraine. Today, as 85 years ago, we face the same aggressor who spares no effort in trying to destroy Ukraine as a nation. This year, the President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, in his address to the UN General Assembly, urged the member states to join the declaration on the 85th anniversary of the Holodomor in Ukraine, commemorating one of the biggest tragedies in human history. With this in mind, let us pay tribute today to the pure souls of the Holodomor victims. Today, we are also joined in spirit by many who lit the candles these days all across the world in honoring the memory of the perished millions. Thank you all. May the memory of the innocents live forever. Вічна пам'ять жертвам Голодомору. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
We are grateful to you, Mr. Ambassador, for sharing your heartfelt remarks and for your support over the years, and not only attending our Requiem service at St. Patrick's Cathedral, but also exposing the truth about the Holodomor within the walls of the United Nations and among its diplomatic community. Every year, we are honored to be joined by the Ambassador of Ukraine, Vasyl Hrechynsky. Unfortunately, because of a security conference in Halifax, he is not able to attend today. But to present words and a greeting from the Ambassador, we are honored to have the General Counsel of Ukraine in New York, the Honorable Oleksiy.
Высокое посвящение публики, всечестнейшие отцы, excellencies, шановна громада. It is my honor to deliver today the address of His Excellency Ambassador of Ukraine, Vasyl Hrechynsky, at the Requiem service and commemoration of Holodomor genocide. Your Excellencies, Reverend Fathers, distinguished guests, дорога українська громада. 85 years have passed since Ukraine suffered from the horrors of the appalling crime against humanity, Holodomor, man-made famine that claimed millions of innocent lives. 85 years would be a whole life, but so many children who were starved to death or were not born to parents perished prematurely in 1932-1933 had never had a chance to live this life. It was a brutal and cruel mass murder that can't ever be justified and must never be forgotten. In spite of our deepest sorrow and strongest indignation, we have no means to either ease the tremendous pain that those men, women, and children have suffered or bring them back to our world. However, we can and we have to make sure that they rest in peace and due tribute is paid to their eternal memory. The only proper way of doing so is to restore the historic truth and to call the crime of Holodomor by its real name, genocide. Ukraine has already condemned the crimes of Stalin, outlawed all kinds of communist propaganda, and acknowledged Holodomor as an act of genocide. Now, against the background of Kremlin's totalitarian expansionist ambitions resurfacing, it's the right time for the world to shed light upon the tragedy of the past and take steps to prevent the history of repeating itself in any form and anywhere. We appreciate U.S. Senate's strong stance on Holodomor and passing its resolution 435 on October 3rd of this year that recognizes the findings of the Commission on the Ukrainian famine, including that, I quote, Joseph Stalin and those around him committed genocide against the Ukrainians in 1932-1933, end quote. We are looking forward to the House companion resolution and are appreciating the work of the Congress members on advancement. We are grateful to the U.S. administration for its support and appreciate the valuable contribution of the governors, mayors, state and local legislatures of 18 U.S. states, including New York and New Jersey, who added their strong voice to recognizing Holodomor as genocide or commemorating the 85th anniversary of the tragedy. The most special gratitude goes to the U.S. Ukrainian community all over the United States for being Ukraine's long-standing ardent supporters, our true friends and reliable partners in raising awareness about Holodomor and promoting Ukraine in the United States. I would like to thank all of you for attending this commemoration, to convey my appreciation to the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, U.S. Committee for Ukraine Holodomor Genocide Awareness, all religious confessions of the Ukrainian churches in the United States, Ukrainian Chorus Dumka, and all honorable speakers for sponsoring and contributing to the memorial event, as well as to express my gratitude to St. Patrick Cathedral for hosting the Requiem service. I would also like to add that despite all outrageous attempts of the past and present to erase Ukrainian national identity and to curb the desire of the Ukrainians to live in a free, independent state, despite the intentions to force us to revise our democratic pro-European choice, Ukraine remains an enduring, united nation committed to define its own destiny and build a sustainable, bright future for generations to come. And we appreciate the support of the world community under the U.S. leadership in achieving this noble goal. Вічна пам'ять жертвам Голодомору і слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Thank you, Honorary Council. Every year we are also honored by the presence of your United States Senator Chuck Schumer. Today is his daughter's wedding, so he is not with us as well. If you'd allow me, I'd like to read his greetings. Dear friends, it is with great reverence that I write this letter commemorating the 85th anniversary of the Holodomor, Ukraine's genocide. Every year I stand with my Ukrainian friends to observe the Holodomor and to extend my deepest sympathies to the victims, survivors of the famine and their families. 85 years ago, Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin weaponized the land itself to force a famine on the Ukrainian people. He tried to annihilate the Ukrainian people. He tried to annihilate the Ukrainian spirit. Thank God he failed. To ensure that these atrocities are not repeated, it is paramount that we continue to remember the genocide and honor the memory of those who cannot speak for themselves. I am proud to announce that the United States is making strides every year towards properly commemorating the Ukrainian genocide. Just last month, a resolution, which I co-sponsored, was unanimously adopted by the U.S. Senate, recognizing the Ukrainian famine of 32-33 as genocide against the Ukrainian people. This resolution, and all similar future efforts, matter because it shows the world that we must stand up, call out genocides where we see them, and never forget. Therefore, I am humbled and honored to join in spirit with everyone gathered here today to remember and honor the millions of innocent victims of Ukraine's genocide. Many thank you to the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America for holding this requiem annually and for all the work you do. As long as I have had the privilege of serving the United States Senate, know that I will continue supporting the Ukrainian American community. Sincerely, Charles Schumer, U.S. Senator. In closing, I would like to invite to the podium His Excellency Bishop Paul Chomnycky of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of Stamford for concluding remarks.
Slava Isus Christu. Dearly beloved in Christ, as we close our prayerful commemoration of the 85th anniversary of the Holodomor today in this venerable cathedral of St. Patrick, I wish to take this opportunity to sincerely thank His Eminence Timothy Cardinal Dolan and the Cathedral Rector, Vasyl Hrechynsky, for once again opening the doors of this beautiful basilica and allowing our prayers for those who died in one of the greatest human catastrophes of the 20th century to rise to God from beneath the beautiful spires of this magnificent temple. We'd also like to thank the Dumka Choir and the director, Maestro Vasyl Hrechynsky, for their evocative and moving responses to the Panakhyda service. When we have the privilege of speaking to survivors of this great human tragedy, we are invariably struck by a response that is shared by most of the survivors when they are asked to speak of their experiences of the Holodomor. They say, "I remember the Holodomor very well, but I have no wish to recall it." Who can blame them? But the rest of us are obliged to remember especially this year when we commemorate the 85th anniversary of these tragic events. Because we are rapidly approaching the day when there will be no more survivors of the Holodomor left alive to recall the horrors that they experienced. We thank God that we still have some with us today. When they pass, the memories that have tormented them for so many years will have finally been put to rest. This is why it is so important, now more than ever, as the years advance, that the memory of the Holodomor never be allowed to fade from our collective consciousness, and that we gather every year at this time to remember. Thankfully, many heart-wrenching personal testimonies of survivors of this tragedy have been meticulously gathered, preserved, and published over the years by historians, so that we and generations that follow can, at least in a small and imperfect way, share the horrors of those who experienced the Holodomor firsthand, and be shocked all over again at the brutal capability of humans to inflict suffering on each other. A capability, unfortunately, that shows no sign of decreasing if continuing events in our world are any indication. Today, 85 years after the hand of famine passed over the bountiful Ukrainian steppe, we, gathered in St. Patrick's Cathedral, remember those who had no one to remember them. We weep for those who had no one to weep for them, and we pray for those who had no one to pray for them. May the good and merciful Lord place their souls in a place of eternal happiness, and may their memory remain with us forever. Сьогодні, дорогі в Христі, ми молилися за упокій душ невинних жертв Голодомору, які не мали нікого, хто б за них помолився. Ніхто над ними не заплакав, ніхто не оплакував їхнього відходу, ніхто не поклав квіти на їхніх могилах, та ніхто не встановив пам'ятних плит на місцях їхнього вічного спочинку. Протягом багатьох років ніхто не пам'ятав жахливих та нелюдських умов, в яких їм довелося зустріти свою смерть від рук бездушного та злісного режиму. Сьогодні виповнюється 85 років після того, як голод пройшов через родючі степи України. І з нагоди цього ми зібралися тут у катедральному соборі Святого Петрикія, щоб пригадати тих, які не мають нікого, хто б пам'ятав про них. Заплакати за тими, хто не мав нікого, хто б оплакував їх. Та молитися за тими, хто не мав нікого, хто б за них помолився. Нехай добрий і милосердний Господь оселить їхні душі у місті вічної радості, і нехай пам'ять про них залишиться з нами назавжди. Ще раз дякуємо за вашу так чисельну та молитовну участь в нинішніх моліннях. Слава Ісусу Христу!
Слава навіки!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Before we all depart, I would just like to acknowledge the presence amongst us today of Carlina Rivera. Ms. Rivera is a member of the New York City Council and represents the 2nd Council District, which includes the Ukrainian community in the East Village. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence.